Thank you for your flexibility. As Minnesotans, we're honoring our fallen public safety officials yesterday, and so I thank all of you for your flexibility in moving one day. So we saved one day for good news. Our forecast is good news. Our economy is humming along. We made critical investments in our budget last year to grow our economy, lower costs for middle-class families, from tax cuts to free school meals to investments in our workforce and career and technical education. The largest investment in state history in infrastructure, from water treatment plants in Duluth to armories in Fergus Falls. More kids are eating school lunch than ever before, nearly a 31% increase. 200,000 kids have already benefited in the first month of the child tax credit, averaging about $1,400 per child. We're outpacing the nation in job growth, and we just outed Texas as one of the top 5 most best business climates in the country. We're going to keep building on that work by implementing the new programs, and ensuring we're delivering services to Minnesotans effectively and efficiently. Forecast doesn't change our focus for this session. We're focused on implementation and infrastructure. 2024 is a bonding year. That's going to be our focus. Now is the time to keep our eye on an economy that is steadily improving. Watch our investments grow, focus on the work ahead of us in the bonding bill, and a few key priorities. We're moving steady and responsibly. These investments in Minnesotans are making a difference. The programs that are being implemented are already proving that it works. And for all of you, I'd ask you'll go back and look of what we stood here and said in November. And the message was the investments to grow a workforce, to make Minnesota competitive in all spaces across the spectrum, to focus on the 5 high needs area of work that we need in Minnesota and workforce, to make sure we're lowering the cost for Minnesotans, whether it's a child tax credit or child care, making sure access to high quality health care, and investing in education. When the headlines read that teachers received the biggest pay raises they've received in years, those are things that build that strong economy. So these investments are working, they're proving out. Again, for all the doom and gloom of November, it took us 3 months to reduce, to grow our surpluses by about a third, and to have our long-term projections that I remind everybody in this room. Many states do not do this. We project out to the next biennium, and we even take into account inflation. And so certainly grateful. Minnesotans are growing businesses. Workers are continuing to see wage increases. We're seeing inflation start to be tamed. We're seeing a business climate of investment in clean energy, clean technology, bioresearch, all growing in Minnesota, which is all positive. So really grateful for the work of this team to put this together. I think the numbers speak for themselves of a humming economy, an optimism, and when I looked at this, my thing is that is morning in Minnesota, and that's where we feel right now. Coming out of a pandemic, coming out of a global recession or potential for a global recession, Minnesota is well positioned for a future economy as any place in the world, and we're making that case. This is a destination. We are the star of the North. We kicked off this week. We're going to be advertising in states across the country. Come to a state where you have the opportunity to grow, thrive, be yourself, free of interference, whether it's in your bedroom or with your children's education. All of those things make Minnesota a great place to be. So be glad to take a few questions.
Governor, the projected, and you mentioned we're unique in projecting, but the projections still have a structural imbalance technically projected, which Republicans are already calling a deficit because Democrats spent too much.
That is incorrect. They told you in November that this was catastrophic, and the first thing we should do is cut meals to our children and cut taxes for the wealthiest corporations. Nothing could be further from the truth. It took us 3 months to reduce that by 33%. This is projected 4 years out. The growth model will be there. We do that to get an idea where things are at. There are so many variables that go into that. The bottom line is we have surpluses on the bottom line. We have responsible spending. We have cut costs of living and taxes for the middle class in the largest tax cuts, from Social Security tax cuts to the child tax credit. So again, very simple. They're going to come in here every time and tell you, oh, we've got to cut spending to the middle class. We got to cut corporate taxes. The fact of the matter is corporate profits are at an all-time high, and the tax rates for many of those are less than 5%. This is a model that shows when the middle class has an opportunity to thrive, when college is affordable, when folks have access to capital that they need to invest in their businesses, you see this growth. We're getting to the point right now is we got to have some folks quit rooting against Minnesota. This is positive. This is good. There's never been these forecasts for the long-term things don't fluctuate a bit, but this has improved dramatically, and that was what we stood. And I know that you will reflect that accurately in your stories, that the governor said it will be a significant improvement by March, and here we are. When you heard on the other side, this will continue to deteriorate, we can't afford to do these programs. We can't afford not to attract top talent, to invest in research, to invest in a clean energy economy, and to rebuild infrastructure. We're not going to go back to Fergus Falls and tell them, no, we're not going to build that armory. When we've got Dilworth looking for a new fire hall to make sure that our first responders are protected, those are the things people expect us to do. So, Director's there.
Can you tell us whether your message to the legislature has changed from December? I tweeted out just the basic numbers, and someone replied, uppercase, fund the teachers. So there's spending demands out there. What are you going to
First
tell
of
them?
all, my message is what incredible partners we have, and a thank you to the legislative leaders who put forward a program that improved lives across Minnesota, that put us into this strong position, who made the investments in the middle class, who were able to get good things done. Oh, and by the way, doing really important things that weren't budgetary that are going to make a difference in the budget, like protecting reproductive freedoms, like making sure we're doing those things necessary, making sure we're tackling things like gun safety. So my message to them is, look, we had an incredibly successful and transformational legislative session. The impact we're going to feel both economic, culturally, socially, and for individuals is going to be decades long. We're already seeing the building of the economic might that was behind this. And my message is, we need to implement these things. We need to get them right. This is a bonding year. We have some more space in there on bonding, and I would assume that they will want to do that because these are important projects. But we're still going to stay in that very, I think, focused and narrow space that this year it's to get those things done. Let's see where we're at. We'll be back here in November, and that will give us a wonderful leg up as we look forward to the 2025 budget year, where we can really think about what we need to tackle. So I think.
What's your, how much spending are you comfortable signing?
We'll have
signing
that
off
budget
the
out.
checks this
We'll have the
year?
budget out in a couple of weeks. I told you we would wait to see this. I saw these numbers at 6:30 this morning. Thank you very much. As I'm briefed on this, my team has been digesting those. Certainly, we have straw budgets that we put together about certain things. I put out in November that it was about the $82 million level that we were at, in about 830 on the bonding. We'll take a look at that. Just caution, as you saw this, caution that revenues and spending are pretty close to balance. 0.1% change, is that correct?
I think that's right.
Okay, that we saw, that I think, again, I would focus like we did much on last legislative session, focus on a lot of one-time looking at that. Certainly here, that the need is still there. I don't want to dismiss that there's more that we can do. But I think it's important to have a systematic long-range approach to this. And so my message to them is still, I'm going to stay very close to those original numbers. We'll get to see now. Our budget will come out in the next couple weeks.
This forecast presumes a larger bonding bill. Are you planning to propose a larger bonding bill, and how might that
Well,
look
we'll take a
different?
look at it, I think. And I just want to say this, the bonding bill is, I think, so great because it gets such bipartisan support. And I've heard from some of these legislatures, Democrats and Republicans, that they were looking for a little more space in there. I've always said that the bonding bill and the robustness of it, staying within our borrowing limits, understanding that interest rates potentially coming down gives us some more space. I'm certainly open to hearing them on that.
Money for local projects?
I think that's probably where they would go. I'll leave it up and we'll work with our partners in the legislature, but I think those are things, those are one-time, those are responsible things. Those do not add to that structural imbalance in any way, and I think those are the things we should probably be focusing on.
If a bill made it to your desk and it was a dollar amount that put us above the amount that you'd be comfortable,
Yeah, I'm not going to
spending.
take a hypothetical now. I just, again, got these 2 hours ago, but we're always open. And I think you've heard me say this up here, and I think it's the way legislators should be. Absolutes before you have a time to draw things through, but if there's a line in this is, look, this is responsible budgeting. And the one thing I would ask on this is, it's not theoretical that you're hearing from the other side. If we cut corporate taxes, this will happen. You've got 5 years that this administration has budgeted and continuously had balanced budgets with tax cuts to the middle class, with investments that we have not seen in generations in Minnesota, all with balanced budgets. So I would just tell you, you can rest assured we'll do that same thing again.
The school lunch program, there's been some crunch there, in terms of expense being higher than originally projected. Is that an area that you would see that you'd like to put some additional money in terms of your supplemental budget?
Yeah, I said that's the hill I'm going to die on. Our friends on the other caucus said that's the place they're first going to cut. Again, it's a very small piece of all of this. The issue there is more kids are using school meals, which we know indicates more. We're getting better attendance. We're getting better ability for students to learn, better ability to self-regulate. We're hearing from across the state how popular this is. And again, when Minnesotans were asked if they like this program, 80% said we love this program. So you can rest assured we'll keep going there. And again, in the midst of what we're talking about that is a slice of investment that is going to pay off for us in the long run.
Governor, what about labor and workforce shortages? Those have been concerns in previous forecasts. It sounds like nationally and in the state that eases a bit, but you're going out and marketing. Talk about how much we need people here and how you get them here.
And again, this is not anything new, and we see it globally, we see it here, demographic changes, demographic patterns, and again, you see who's moving into places or whatever. From an economic perspective, if you're seeing seniors or retired people move to southern states or whatever, certainly that's a choice they can make, but that's not a workforce development. What we're making the case is if you want to have a career and you want to see what it looks like to live in a state that's prosperous, moving forward, tackling innovation, we're going to have to do that. I think a concerted effort. I thank the legislature again, the money they put into the Minnesota Investment Fund, the money that they put into job growth, our focus on these 5 major industries. I was down at Geotech in Stewartville 2 days ago. These are the folks that make composite fiberglass arms for power poles. Those are usually wood. With a changing climate, we're seeing those things come down. We saw an ice storm in Worthington a few years ago, pulled down a mile worth of those. This is a new way of looking at that. They are high-tech manufacturing in Stewartville on these, selling globally, and we're focusing on whether it's healthcare, whether it's first responders, whether it's skilled labor. We're focusing on the training, the workforce, but we're also making the case to folks, come here and enjoy that. It's going to be important.
Can you follow up on that? Specifically, you mentioned some of the progressive policies that you see as an attraction here. Can you talk about that and how you're marketing the state that way?
Well, certainly we're marketing as a top 5 business state. Our climate is good. You're seeing corporate profits are up at record levels. That's a good thing. That means they're working on it. We're making the case both from a child care affordability perspective, trying to lower the cost of housing, making sure you have access to paid family and medical leave. And just to be very candid on this we're not putting government in between you and your doctor. We're not telling you who you can marry. We're not banning books. We're focusing on feeding our children and getting great teachers paid a fair wage in those schools. And I think when people start to hear that, that's a contrast. And I'm hearing it when I'm out there and I'm telling you, we're sitting down, we're making calls, meeting with folks we're getting leads from people and say, hey, this company's looking at settling in Minnesota. Will you call them? Absolutely. So every week I'm calling these folks and saying, here's what Minnesota has to offer, and that's how we're selling it.
Before that IVF, you talked about your personal story. Can that be part of the attraction to Minnesota now, those concerns about reproductive health?
It sure the heck better be. And again, this is when someone tells you who they are, believe them. It's outrageous. We in Minnesota will continue to protect, to make access to reproductive and contraceptive care, because again, I said last year, they'll come for the next one. Trust me on this, not being being able to predict the future, but it'll be reproductive care and those things next. This is a state that we're not interested in doing those things, and it's going to start to make a difference. So,
I think you said you're assuming no government shutdown, right? But it's been punted essentially a week. Are there things, in case there is a short government shutdown, that you're doing to help lessen the blow for programs, workers, residents?
Yeah, we always have things that are automatically in pace. Revenue knows what they need to do and what they need to pay. I will re-emphasize that again, that lack of Republican leadership in the House of Representatives is absolutely unacceptable. This continuous revolution to shut down. Again, that's right. I think those are things that another reason to be a little bit cautious. The absolute ineptitude of the House of Representatives under the leadership. We don't have a farm bill. We don't have some of these things done, and I think that's where Dr. Klamakitis made note of that. Those things can be disruptive. Here in Minnesota, as far as the cash accounts, the cash flow accounts and those things, we do have enough that we plan on it, and it takes quite some time before we have to go into extraordinary measures. I don't want to speak for you, Commissioner Marquardt, but you've taught me well. A good teacher.
Seeing the change in corporate profits, are you happy with where the corporate tax rate is right now?
Well, that's kind of a tricky one. The study came out just this week and said the average corporate tax rate for some of the largest companies in America is 5%. I don't know when workers that are, caring for our children or caring for our seniors are paying 16%. But I think we struck a pretty good balance. I think it puts to rest this myth that there's an overtaxation, this constant thing, that's the only way to attract business. Because here in Minnesota, we're seeing that our corporations are outpacing, their profits are up, they're excelling at this. That makes sense that we're probably in about the right place. So look, I'm not interested in raising any of these things, but I'm certainly not interested in lowering them because I think we're finding that right space.
You won't have any proposed tax increases in a supplemental budget to raise revenues for any additional spending?
I want to be cautious about it. It's disingenuous before we hear things, but I can tell you from our perspective in our budget, no, we will not. We think we're in a good spot. I think the Social Security tax cut, the child tax credit, some of those things make great sense to us. And I think the investments that the honest folks who worked hard in the legislature to make sure infrastructure investments, that those were ongoing, it makes sense. So I think we're in a good spot.
One more. There is one.
You had 14 protesters climb over your fence last night. Do you think that Minnesota should have an official stance on the conflict in Gaza?
I don't respond to the safety and security personally on my family, so thank you all.